Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a little bit more technical and fundamental analysis on Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency markets in today's video, because if you guys have been watching the channel for quite some time, you guys will know that I've been discussing for over a year at this point the idea of the underlying intrinsic value of Bitcoin, as I call it. And I was looking around doing some research on crypto every morning, as I do before I make these videos, and I came across a very interesting video where Thomas Lee went on Squawkbox at CNBC, and say what you will about CNBC, but Thomas Lee does seem to know what he's talking about. Now, of course, he did make an incorrect prediction about what would happen with Bitcoin at the end of 2018, but across his career, Thomas Lee knows what he's talking about, and he's a very intelligent person to be listening to when you're talking about markets, and he is very bullish on Bitcoin. And in this interview, Thomas Lee says something very, very interesting. I'll play the clip here in just a second, but in essence, he says that he believes that the fair value, similar to what I would call the underlying intrinsic value for Bitcoin, is hovering around $14,000. Now, of course, Bitcoin is trading at $5,000 right now, so there's a very big discrepancy between those two values, and for a long time, I've been talking about the underlying intrinsic value for Bitcoin. I've never put a number on it, but he has, based on some of his own analysis, and we're going to be discussing that in today's video. Is Bitcoin about to go to $14,000? Has a bull market started? All of those questions and more, hopefully, we will get to in today's video. So guys, if you do enjoy today's video, definitely consider dropping a like, hitting that subscribe button, and smashing that notification bell, guys. It does help out the channel when you do it, and I would be appreciative if you did it. But without much further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. We're not going to be doing a whole lot of chart reading in today's video, and the chart reading we will be doing is on the longer term, but I did want to look at the short term here, since we do have some things to discuss here on the hourly chart. One of the first things I want to mention is the normal head and shoulders pattern that we discussed in yesterday's video. It's starting to look a little bit lopsided unless Bitcoin starts falling over in the next 12 hours or so. That very well may not actually play out the way that I had thought maybe it would. I wasn't totally convinced that this was a good head and shoulders pattern. It doesn't really look all that great. But nevertheless, over the last 12 hours or so, Bitcoin has actually been trending to the upside. If Bitcoin had fallen off here and started moving to the downside, then this definitely would have been a completed head and shoulders pattern, albeit an ugly one, but it would have been. But over the last couple of hours, Bitcoin has actually been moving to the upside and is trading around $5,000. Definitely a good sign for the bulls that Bitcoin hasn't gone ahead and fallen over. I'm going to give it a couple more days to let Bitcoin cool off and trade sideways, consolidate, all that jazz, before we actually start really looking for a big move on Bitcoin. But I want to see a big move come out of Bitcoin in the next 3 days, whether it's bullish or bearish. I think something is coming. Bitcoin has so much exuberance in it right now that either the bears are going to take us back down or the bulls are going to blast us off to Alpha Centauri again. You guys know that something is probably going to be happening in the next couple of days, in the next 3 days or so. I really just don't feel like Bitcoin is going to continue trading sideways for much longer, considering how much volatility we've seen re-enter the market. Now, of course, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get on to the main point of today's video, and that would be that idea of underlying intrinsic value on Bitcoin. Guys, I've been discussing this idea for a very, very long time. Over a year, I was talking about underlying intrinsic value when Bitcoin was starting the bear market over here, and how I was saying that Bitcoin was just starting to approach the underlying intrinsic value. Bitcoin was way overbought up here. Underlying intrinsic value is my term. Fair value is a term that Thomas Lee uses, but essentially they mean the same thing. Essentially, it's what is the fair price for Bitcoin. What should Bitcoin be trading at if all market forces were alleviated, all fundamentals were alleviated, and Bitcoin went to what it was actually worth? And that's kind of a nebulous concept. It's hard to define that. I'm going to show you two different definitions that put that level at two different places. But needless to say, everyone who calculates some form of fair value, underlying intrinsic value, every single calculation I've seen a lot of calculations in doing research for this video and prior, every single one of them put the underlying intrinsic value for Bitcoin above where Bitcoin is right now. So keep that in mind as we continue on with the video. For a long time, I've drawn this chart. Price goes down, underlying intrinsic value goes up. Somewhere there's a cross, and eventually we're going to fill this in. That's what I've been saying. And that's what Thomas Lee has to say. So I'm going to go ahead and play about a 15-second clip here to go ahead and give you context for what Thomas Lee said. Then we're going to dive into some articles discussing what he says and build off of those. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and let him talk, and I'll be quiet for a second.
And you also have an argument about what the fair value of Bitcoin is today, which is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's right. So if you were to take a combination of active addresses and activity per user, that's explained over 90% of Bitcoin since 2013. The fair value for Bitcoin right now is 14,000.
And that is a very bold prediction, saying that the fair value of Bitcoin is 14,000. And by the way, try as I might, I cannot find anywhere discuss, and I want to say this for context, even though I think what he's saying is true, and I think he does have validity behind this. I think this is based on internal research that isn't available to the public. But as far as I can find, I can't find the source that he's using for this. But that kind of makes sense. Thomas Lee does work with Fundstrat, and they do have plenty of internal analysis, so this is probably based off of an internal calculation that's not available to the public, where he gets this actual data. Fundstrat has been known to make its own indicators and whatnot in the past, so it's not terribly surprising that I wasn't able to find this calculation, but there are other similar calculations that I can use to make my point. But also the point is that Thomas Lee seems to believe that the fair value for Bitcoin, the underlying intrinsic value for Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it, is way up here. It's up here and Bitcoin's down here. If Bitcoin was to return to $14,000 and go up to where it was actually worth, like Thomas Lee says, the fair value is, that would be nearly a 3 times return. That would be a very, very massive return. And Thomas Lee isn't saying that's going to happen anytime soon. I think in that video he even says that it might not happen in 2019, Bitcoin returning to that. But eventually it is more than likely going to happen. And he said a couple of other quotes. He says, this is basically what we just heard. Bitcoin's fair value, given the number of active wallet addresses, usage per account, and factors influencing the supply, is in between $13,800 and $14,800. This is taken from a quote that he said a couple months ago. Of course, this is actually an article from December 18th, 2018, but it's a very similar thing that he said from just yesterday. This article actually talks about it. I do recommend you guys go through, watch this video, and look at both of these articles. If I remember, I will put both of these in the description down below, but there's the title for one and there's the title for the other. It shouldn't be that hard to find it in a Google search. I do recommend you go ahead and read into these, because what he's saying is very interesting. Like I said, I've discussed this for a very long time because I think it's a very valid way to look at the market. Because if we look at what was going on in 2017, Bitcoin was obviously, let me refresh the page, sometimes TradingView likes to glitch out like that. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, but what you'll find if you look at these markets is that in 2017, Bitcoin was ridiculously overbought. Bitcoin was trading way above that fair value, underlying intrinsic value, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it fair value because it's a shorter term. Bitcoin was trading way above that fair value, and we knew that because Bitcoin was, well, it fell off a cliff and it started a bear market. Bitcoin was ridiculously overbought, and nobody in their right mind was buying Bitcoin up at $20,000. Some people did, and of course, I think they wish they hadn't, but people did do that. But $20,000 was not where to be investing in Bitcoin. Bitcoin was so far above what it was actually worth. And I've been drawing for a long time that fair value of Bitcoin as being somewhere around $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. Thomas Lee puts it way up here at $14,000. Like I said, I couldn't find the source that he was using, but I believe what he was referring to was actually an internal source. It's not uncommon for these financial companies like Fundstrat that he works for and works with. It's not uncommon for them to have internal indicators that they use, so that's more than likely what he's discussing. But I did find a website that actually goes ahead and tries to calculate the fair value of Bitcoin, and is this value right here, coinfairvalue.com. I do recommend you go and look at this. Now, I'm not going to get into how they calculate their fair value. Different websites, different analysts, they calculate fair value of Bitcoin in different ways. So you have to understand that you're going to see wildly different numbers. But like I said, just about every single website, every single analyst that I've looked at that calculates some form of fair value for Bitcoin puts it quite a bit above where Bitcoin currently is. And this website, even though it doesn't exactly mirror what Thomas Lee said, it does give you an idea of what I've been talking about how Bitcoin for a long time, especially even continuing through the bear market, Bitcoin was above that fair value. Bitcoin was trading above where it actually needed to be, because Bitcoin was coming down from a gigantic bull market. Bitcoin had run all the way to $20,000. Fair value was down here somewhere, and Bitcoin was still trying to bounce around at $6,000, and it had to come down even lower. And eventually, it did do that. And as you can kind of see on this graph right here, this is what I've been talking about for the last year or so. Bitcoin has actually gone, according to this website and according to a lot of analysts, according to what I think about the market as well, Bitcoin has gone ahead and gone below that fair value for Bitcoin. So now Bitcoin is trading under that fair value. And now, instead of trending to the downside, Bitcoin can start trending to the upside and getting above that fair value. And a similar thing happened during the last bull and bear market cycle back over here in 2014 and 15. If we look back over here, let me zoom out a little bit so you get some context. Bitcoin for a long time during the bull market back over here in 2013 was above fair value. And then after going through the bear market for quite some time, Bitcoin fell back below that fair value. And then for a long time, it went and traded below it. And then eventually Bitcoin got above it and went on a gigantic bull market. And interestingly enough, if you look at this graph down here, this isn't volume or anything. This is actually the price over the fair value. As you can see, Bitcoin back over here, as calculated by coinfairvalue.com, in 2017 was trading at almost 11 times what its fair value should have been, which shows you just how far you can run in a bull market. But recently, Bitcoin has actually been trading below its fair value. And as I've said for so long, guys, I mean, literally over a year, I've been talking about this on the channel. You can go back to videos from a long time ago, and I've been talking about this. Bitcoin is eventually going to close that gap between the price action and the fair value. Eventually, Bitcoin's going to do this number, rally to the upside, kick off a bull market, and it's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a rally the likes of which we've never seen before. At least not in dollar value. We've probably seen one in percentage-wise value. But as you can see back over here, Bitcoin was trading at 10 times what this website calculates Bitcoin's fair value to be based on a lot of different technicals and fundamentals that they look at. And I think a similar thing is probably going to happen in the next bull market. Bitcoin's probably going to go to 5 or 10 times its underlying fair value, and the fair value is going to be rising all the while as more and more people adopt Bitcoin, as Bitcoin continues to move to the upside, as institutions start stepping into the market, as Bitcoin ETFs get approved, as things like BACT come online, as things like Fidelity Custody come online, as all of these fundamentals continue to improve in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's technicals continue to improve, as Bitcoin moves into a bull market. That fair value for Bitcoin is going to go up. It's going to do something like this. Bitcoin's going to get above that fair value and blast off like a rocket ship in the direction of Alpha Centauri. You guys know, like I said a couple videos ago, you seem to like that. We went to the moon in 2017. The moon's a pit stop next time. Bitcoin's going to the stars. Bitcoin's about to rally in a way that we've never seen before. And I think that's going to happen sooner than we think. Now, I've talked about in the last couple of videos about how I think there's a decent chance anyway that Bitcoin falls over and that this rally is going to be short-lived and then another rally will start from there. I'm not talking short-term here, guys. What happens in the next month is completely irrelevant to what I'm discussing in today's video. What I'm saying in today's video is that Bitcoin is ridiculously undervalued. Bitcoin is really very far undervalued depending on what you look at, and just quite undervalued if you look at a website like coinfairvalue.com. But no matter which way you slice it, Bitcoin's fair value is above where it currently is. And you know what that means? That means bullishness. That means Bitcoin is going to return to that. Because if you look at this fair value that they discuss here on Coin Fair Value, and if you were to look at a chart of what Thomas Lee is talking about, what you're going to see is that during the majority of bull and bear market cycles, Bitcoin is above its fair value. Because in general, if you were to look at like a yearly chart for Bitcoin, not a monthly or a weekly chart, like a yearly chart for Bitcoin, in general, Bitcoin moves to the upside. If you were to put like 1,000 moving average on Bitcoin and then back extrapolate it back into the past, Bitcoin in general is moving to the upside. So it makes sense that Bitcoin is almost always above its fair value. But what doesn't make, or what it does make sense, but what you see that hasn't happened recently is that only in certain points in the market, only during certain time periods in the market is Bitcoin below that fair value. And when it is, that's generally a good time to be investing in Bitcoin. Because let's look back in time. Back over here when Bitcoin was below its underlying fair value, back over here when Bitcoin was below it, right over here in 2015, that was one of the best times to be investing in Bitcoin. This time right over here. Because that was the time that Bitcoin was down here trading around $200 or so. And the last time that Bitcoin was under its fair value, as is shown on this chart over here, the last time that happened, Bitcoin rallied 100 times. From $200 all the way to $20,000. Bitcoin went on a gigantic bull market, and as we've looked at with 20 different technical indicators, Bitcoin is in a very similar position. It's in an accumulation phase. All the moving averages, all the oscillators, all the other technicals point to Bitcoin being about halfway through or a little better of the accumulation phase, moving on into a bull market in the next couple of months. And this is the time you want to be getting into long positions. I'm not telling you guys to buy. I'm just telling you that I think it's a good idea to buy. I'm not telling you to buy. I'm telling you I think it's a good idea to be buying for the long term. Not for the short term. I'm saying investing-wise for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years as the Bitcoin halving comes up in 2020, as a lot of these technicals and a lot of these fundamentals come to fruition and start pushing Bitcoin to the upside. I think we're going to see a lot of bullishness coming over the next couple of years. And Thomas Lee seems to believe so also. And I will put a disclaimer here. Yes, Thomas Lee has been wrong in the past. Yes, Thomas Lee did predict a $15,000 Bitcoin by the end of 2018. He did make that prediction. But to be fair to Thomas Lee as well, if you look back on his career, it's over a 20-year career. He's been doing this stuff for a long time. He's been working in markets for a very long time. He does know what he's talking about, and he does have a very good track record of making very accurate predictions. So just because he's made one bad prediction recently doesn't mean that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Everybody makes mistakes. Don't try and say you've never made a bad prediction, because we all have. I know I am certainly guilty of that, and so is everyone. So I think what he's saying is right, and I think we are going to see a lot of bullishness coming to Bitcoin. Tell me in the comment section down below what you think of what we've discussed in today's video. Do you agree with Thomas Lee's idea that a $14,000 Bitcoin is what is fair for Bitcoin right now, based off of active addresses and based off of the usage of those addresses? Do you think that's a good way to calculate the fair value of Bitcoin? Because based on what he's saying, it seems to be a pretty accurate way of calculating the fair value of Bitcoin. And I know I've seen that statistic somewhere before. I know I've seen a graph of what he's talking about before, come to think of it. I just can't find it. It's somewhere on the internet, but it's hard to find something like that, because every time I look up fair value, I find an article about Thomas Lee. If you can find an article like that, send it to me. You can email it to me. There's a email address on the About page. You can email it to me. I would be very interested to see that, if you can find that actual visual data so I can show it to you guys. But anyway, guys, I am rambling on, and this is going to wrap it up for this video. By the way, guys, this weekend, starting tomorrow, I'll be back on Monday. I'm going to be gone. There will be a video up every single day, and while I'm gone, I will be running a sale on the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy. Since the videos will not be topical, I'll go ahead and give you guys 20% off the course. That sale will start tomorrow, so if you want to buy the course today at full price, feel free to do so. Links in the description. But if you want to save 30 bucks, there is going to be a coupon code tomorrow. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.